All right, it's time, folks. Welcome to my session, Productivity Through User Adoption in 7 Steps. In this session, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to do a better implementation of Microsoft Teams, how to avoid the most common pitfalls, and make your end users more happy and increase usage of the application and so forth. In this case, I'm focusing mostly on Microsoft Teams, but this could actually apply to any other kind of implementation as well. Also, I'm gonna keep my video off for this because I'm feeling quite sick and I look like crap, so I'll probably do you a favor. So just bear with me here. I'm Adam Deltinger. I'm an IT consultant from Sweden. I work with most of the services within the Microsoft 365 suite, but mostly focusing on Microsoft Teams and end user adoption. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter. And if you have any questions or so forth, you can also ask, just reach out to me anytime you want. Also, I want to just give a thanks to all the sponsors and the organizers making this event possible. I love these kinds of events, online free events, where people can share their expertise and knowledge to people all around the world. So that's a great thing. Thank you. All right. So being an employee myself, I have many times received an email saying something like, hey, we got this new application rolling out or service or whatever. There's a link to some more information, some documentation, and how-to guides maybe. And this can apply to all sorts of apps and services like time reporting tools, ticket management systems, or Microsoft Teams, of course. So later, this application was rolled out, and I found myself never really keen to use it. It almost felt like I was being forced to use it. And every time I had to use it, I looked for that email because I hadn't learned how that application worked. So I tried to find that email with instructions, what button to click or so forth, or even worse, ask a coworker for the 5th time what button to click. So I used the application because I had to, not really because I really wanted to. So why do then this happen? You can ask yourself, are you lazy? Yeah, sure. I'm kind of a lazy person, but there's actually more to it. No one really told me why we should use this app or upgrade or whatever, and how that benefited me in my work. I'm sure this tool was better, had better features and so on, but no one really told me about them or even gave me an interest of finding them out for myself. So this is already off to a bad start, and this is not how to do it, and it's not a good adoption strategy. So when I'm talking about adoption, what do I mean by it? And it's kind of a buzzword nowadays, and Microsoft is focusing heavily on it, creating tons of content around this. So you can ask yourself, why now? If you look back some years ago, we had a much more easily controlled work environment. People had a computer at their desktop with a bunch of group policy objects, limiting what user could do and not do on their computer. Then there were corporate firewalls which control what services and data we could use, both externally and internally. It was easy for IT departments to make us use the tools and services they wanted us to use. And nowadays we have something called the modern workplace or digital workplace. And many, not all, but many users have a bunch of mobile devices. They're all connected to internet and have access to thousands of apps and services. And it's getting harder for organizations to control these. And of course, you can manage and govern mobile devices too, but many times you actually should do that, but more in the sense of security and governance, and not forcing users into using your applications. Because it's clear, it's far more easy to have your users wanting to use your applications instead of restricting them to only be able to use them. And of course, end users will always find other ways as well. You've maybe all heard of the term shadow IT. They will always be one step ahead, and IT departments will need to put in so much effort into keeping up. So what we need to do instead is to make our users aware of our application, then gain their interest and curiosity about it. Then they will use it, and our goal is that they will like using it, and even better, they will actually start to love using it and tell other people about it. When we come to this, we have succeeded. This is what end user adoption is to me. So before I go into step number 1, I just want to point out that each one of these steps will take some time and effort to complete. But I can assure you that if you do all or some of these steps, your chances of success is going to be much greater. So step number 1, collect important information. There can never be too much information, right? So in order to do this, you need to find your, I call them adoption stakeholders, and do kind of workshopping with them. An adoption stakeholder, with that I mean people within your organization that knows about your company. They knows about your values, the culture, your processes, and even more importantly, your pains. They need to know why you're rolling out Microsoft Teams in the first place. And when I help customers and ask them these questions, most often there's two reasons for this. They might have and use Office 365 for email, and they now want to start using other services within the suite as well that they already pay for, and they've heard about Microsoft Teams, of course, and they heard it's great, right? One other reason is that they use Skype for Business Online, and that will go end of life, and Teams is replacing Skype, so they need to kind of make a move, right? And these are all valid reasons. But they don't really answer the most important questions. Also, from an end user perspective, they don't really care about this. They want to know how they can benefit from something if they're going to learn a new application, right? So the kind of, I call it what's in it for me. So in this workshop I was talking about, you need to ask yourself these things. Why use Microsoft Teams? Is Teams really a solution? What parts of Teams do you need, and in what order? If you want to implement all the features within Teams, and if not, and if in that case, like in which order do you really implement them? And here's also where the next question comes in, the pains. Your adoption stakeholder should be able to tell the pains you and the end users are struggling with. Make sure to identify all those and how Teams can help resolve those pains in the turn. Next, also are the quick wins and the long-term goals. Quick wins are very important because they help end users getting excited and interested in the product. If you identify a user pain within your organization and Teams somehow can fix this without too much investment, this is a quick win. So maybe, for example, if your user is also struggling with Teams or conducting meetings today, we know that Microsoft Teams is great to conduct meetings with a lot of features like meeting recording, meeting notes, simplicity of joining, and so forth. All this is right there built in, ready for your users to start using. So we can use this as a quick win. And keep on finding all these and give your users the what's in it for me, so to speak. Also make sure to set the long-term goals. What is it that you want with this what do you want this implementation to accomplish? So we're going to move on to step 2, which is conducting a pilot. Running a pilot is important towards having a successful rollout. And how extensive it needs to be depends on the size of the rollout, the number of users, number of scenarios you have to test, and so forth. It might also be done in different steps, depending on if you are doing a full rollout off the bat or in sequences. There might also be more than one pilot group, of course. This needs to be addressed during the previous workshops, or you have to sit down and have the new ones. Doing a pilot is important because you need to know what works and what doesn't work. Implementing Microsoft Teams fully, not knowing this, will probably end up with unsatisfied end users. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my take on what a pilot is about. Also, be aware of that Microsoft have lots of great content on how to set up and run a pilot. So make sure you dig into that before setting up your pilot. So first, pilot a scenario with the most common variables to the organization as a whole. And that means that The things you try out during the pilot should be something that most of your users will be using. So, for example, doing a pilot on how salespersons can work more efficiently with leads, for example, they will benefit your sales departments, but won't do much for the rest of your users. So here you find common ways of work that applies to the masses, so to speak. If you have business units having very particular processes and ways of working, it might be a good idea to make this as a separate pilot as well. So depending on if you're doing one or several pilots, you need to make sure that you have the right pilot users, right? If you're doing only one, I'd say it's a good idea to have users from all different parts of your organization, because this way you will find the most do's and don'ts and will be more prepared for full implementation. So when you know what pilot users you have, you should give them appropriate training. They don't need to be experts, but they should receive enough training to fulfill their day-to-day work, work tasks in the way you intended them to be. In the pilot, you should also try out all these quick wins you found during the initial workshop as well. Try to resolve those pains I was talking about earlier with the help of Microsoft Teams. And of course, overall, get feedback throughout the pilot and adjust accordingly. What works and what don't work. Some intended ways of working, you might not cut it maybe. Then you have to go back to the drawing board and just try again, right? Teams is an awesome service that does a lot, but it doesn't do everything. And sometimes you find that Teams is just not suitable for what you need. So I recommend collecting the most common questions you're asked during the pilot, because we will use these later on. So summarize this step, make sure to pilot the right things, and also having the right users as pilot users. Make sure to try out every scenario and adjust till it just works. Come to number 3, which is communication. So I'd say this is one of the most important steps and shouldn't be underestimated. It's also important to note that this step is something you do from start to finish during the implementation, or even better yet, continues on even afterwards. You can remember that email I was talking about in the beginning. You can call that communication, right? But although it's not very good and it's far from enough, communicating with your end users about what's going on, how, when, and why is a foundation of good end user adoption. Also, as stated earlier, communication is something that's supposed to happen before, during, and even after rollout. And I can also mention that Microsoft yet again had made a lot of great material and content to use here regarding communication. They've done there's finished email templates, flyers, and best practice examples, and so on. And I've been talking about getting the end users invested in your rollout and in the product you're implementing. And one part of this is communication. Start informing users about Microsoft Teams ahead of time. What is it? What will the implementation look like? Then you describe why you roll out Microsoft Teams and what the high-level gains and benefits are. And then you also explain the personal benefits of Microsoft Teams, the what's in it for me part. You need to get your users interested and create curiosity for Microsoft Teams. And here's, of course, where all those pains and quick wins also comes into play yet again. If you can pinpoint an issue a user have and give them a solution for this, you have come a long way. During the rollout, keep users aware of what's going on and don't leave them in the dark. Keep building their interest and make them feel they're involved, not forced into something. Further on, Teams is also an ever-evolving service, which means that new features are being released all the time. Many of these may improve teamwork, save time, and help users being more effective. So make sure to keep your users in the loop regarding this. So, and this also applies to my next step, which is continuous learning. This follows the same track as communication, meaning that this is something you do from the very start and never really stop doing. I've been talking about giving pilot users training, but when the rollout is happening, all users should have some knowledge about how to use Teams. General tutorials and guides can be given to users already before the actual rollout and also during the pilot. But the result of the pilot sets the kind of the way of working in place and reflects the more in-depth training. So training can be done in so many ways depending on numerous factors. How many people need training, location of users, are they spread across many sites, offices, or even countries? Do you have training tools in place that you use? You should preferably use channels for training that users already use. You're of course not limited to only one channel, but can use several. So yet again here, Microsoft have put in a great effort in creating material, training material for Microsoft Teams. So what kind of, you have to evaluate what kind of channels to use here. So for example, and with channels, I mean, you can start by sending out some basic how-to emails to your users. Then you email is a channel. And if you use Jammer in your organization, make some post in Jammer about this. And this of course also goes for general communication about the overall implementation as well. You might have a learning management system in place, and that's a great way of doing training for your users. In most cases, it's really easy to set up courses and add pre-made content to them, having them up and running in no time. Classroom trainings are very effective as well, but they also require a set location where users need to go, the scheduling to fit many users at the same place and time as well. And this might not be viable for a large organization with lots of users in many locations. But there's also the possibility to have classroom trainings for some groups of users. For example, if you have a champions team, which I will also discuss soon. Also remember that when Microsoft Teams is rolled out, Teams is a great channel to get information and training content to your users as well. And as with communication, training should never stop. Make sure users are aware of new features and how to use them. And as I promised, we're now reached number 5, which is Champions Program. Early in the process of your implementation, you should consider to set up a Champions Program. So I'm just going to briefly talk about what is a Champions Program, or what is a champion. A champion is someone that would help you spread the word, the knowledge, and the kind of hype around the service or product that you're implementing. They can also be your ears and eyes during and after rollout to get a sense of your users' thoughts and feelings. So you need to get the right people set up for this team of champions. And a champion usually looks like a person that is very keen about trying out new things. In this case, loves new technology and are eager to learn and start using it. They typically aren't afraid of change and are often someone that other people ask for help about tools and technology. This is, however, no rule or a must. I often advise customers to find these persons with other kinds of personalities as well, like I call them dissenters, users that aren't too happy to change their behavior and habits. They're happy with things as they are, and they like to stick with it. So if you manage to convince these persons that Microsoft Teams is a great tool and how it can benefit themselves and everyone else, other users will take notice of this. So this is also a great way to make sure other users really find the real purpose of Microsoft Teams, the great benefits of Microsoft Teams. Another tip is also to find these champions from all corners of your organization. And as I said, they will help you help users and will be a source of feedback as well. So if they reach the entire organization, it will make sure that all voices will be heard, and help is kind of always nearby. And at the same time, they're also your voice, right? So when you've decided on the selected group of champions, you need to make sure they get the appropriate training here as well. They should know Microsoft Teams pretty well, but not limited to only that. They should know the goals of the implementation itself, the high-level gains, as well as personal ones. This way, they also get more invested in the rollout themselves, making them better champions. Also remember collecting. I mentioned collecting those questions during the pilot. Give your champions the answers to these questions, preparing them to answer your users' questions when they arise, because they will probably be asked as well overall. Also make sure your champions know each other and work together as a team. They can help each other out, share ideas and solutions to obstacles some might have run into, and find a solution to. What better way of doing this is through Microsoft Teams itself. So set up a champions team in Microsoft Teams, create channels for different topics like issues, questions, general information, and so forth. In here, they can also have recurring meetings where they share feedback and status with each other, if any bigger issues have arisen and how to move forward. You yourself should also be part of all or some of these meetings, so you can take action upon the information given if needed. Because your champions are all over your organization, hopefully, they probably hear what your users are saying, if they're happy or displeased. It's important you are aware of how your users feel about Microsoft Teams in order to take the necessary actions for a successful implementation. All right. Step number 6, individual workshops. I've done lots of Microsoft Teams training, including classroom trainings myself. It's usually like 3-4 hours long, and when it's over and people walk out of that door, then what happens? I can tell you in many cases, it's business as usual. They go back to work and do what they need to do. Therefore, it's important to time user training in correlation to the implementation. Best scenario, users had access to Teams by the time of the trainings. Although, even so, when people are busy, they tend to do things as they are used to do things and are comfortable with, even if it could have been done faster, better, or more effective in Microsoft Teams. So users tend to procrastinate, of course, and they forget. You will, of course, have your champions helping you to push users forward, but there's still one dilemma. Every team or business unit work in different ways. They have different tasks overall with different processes, document types, different kind of communication, how they communicate with each other and so on. This means that it will vary a lot how different business units will utilize Teams. So when I talk to customers sometime after my trainings, I find very often that users now have a team running up, and they started using it a little bit or various parts of it, but they've also come to kind of a halt. This is many times because they have a hard time transforming their old ways of working into doing it with Microsoft Teams. There's old processes, maybe file shares with files they don't know how to make a structure of in Teams. They tell me when they have looked around with Microsoft Planner and tried it out, but they can't really figure out how to use it in the best possible way. And also here, to point out, business critical processes ought to be they should be a part of the pilot. But I mean, they have all these kinds of their own processes within their teams, and there are often lots of other more specific ones as well. So what I do, and I've also seen very good results from, is I do individual workshops with the various business units. If there are teams working in very similar ways, they can be part of the same workshop, of course. So sometime after training, I reach out to the different functions within the organization and their team managers, for example, and schedule these workshops. Often it's like 1 to 2 hours is enough. And most important is that the users attending, that they know about their team's processes, way of working, and so on. So while in these workshops, I ask them simple questions. How is it going? Are you using Teams? What obstacles are you running into? I ask them about their specific processes and help them do this with Microsoft Teams right there and then. Sometimes, of course, it requires me to take notes and follow up later on, but most often users just need that final push in to start using Teams fully. One issue I run into often is in these workshops is with files, actually. Commonly, they have a file share where the team used to store all the files, and they're not struggling with how to move these files to Microsoft Teams. So it's usually just a matter of creating the appropriate channels, for example, in their team in Microsoft Teams, and that corresponds to their folders in the file share, and then they can migrate these files for themselves. So I just show them this, show them, help them up with the setup, and they can finish the migration themselves. But things like this keeps them from doing their day-to-day work in teams right now. So I just try to solve their problems and optimize their workflow, answer specific questions till it feels secure enough to make the leap. And yet again, I've seen some great results and increase in usage after these workshops. So the final step, measure usage. Microsoft offers several usage reports that gives you information about how much Teams is used in your organization. Keeping track of the overall usage during and especially after the implementation is valuable to make sure your users are using Teams in a sustainable way. You don't want Microsoft Teams to be kind of the new cool tool of the month, and then they go back to the old ways of working and their old behavior. So by checking in on these reports, you make sure that Teams is being used as planned and that the usage increase over time. The rollout of Microsoft Teams might have been very successful, but it's the outcome of it that really matters. If by any means usage is decreasing, you should take action as soon as possible and find out why and in what way. You can meet with your champions and hear what they think. Hopefully you've communicated with them even before usage dropped and found out about any errors, misconfigurations, or unhappy users and taken action upon it. But things can change, of course, and therefore it's important to watch the actual statistics now and then. How often may depend, but I recommend looking at the reports once every other week, just after the rollout, and maybe less frequently later on. It often takes a while for users to change their way of working and change overall, but after a while, it sticks. You can find a few reports in the usage reports section in the admin portal. These, as well as a few others, can also be found in Teams Admin Center under Analytics and Report. This includes, for example, usage activity on a user level, which team clients users are logging into, PST and live events usage, and the total activity of Microsoft Teams. So how to use and react to these reports, of course, because of course also depends on your initial goals and how Teams should be used. So for example, if you have take the Teams client report. So if you have communicated to your users to use the mobile client due to the fact that you have many mobile users, and see that most users don't actually use their mobile clients, you might have a problem to solve. It could be due to insufficient information, poor training, or other reasons. So you need to work this out with your adoption stakeholders and champions. From the Teams client itself, Teams owner can also get analytics reports based on their Teams activity. They can see the active users, total number of messages, and activity over time. This can, of course, be like fun fact for owners, but it can also be part of your adoption strategy. Many organizations I know, they put a kind of a responsibility upon team owners to make sure that communication and collaboration is kept within Microsoft Teams service. And this report makes it easier for them to acknowledge active users and overall activity as well. And as I say, I mean, many times I just say, why not make a kind of a fun thing out of it and have like a competition of most active user of the month or something like that. Oh yeah, I forgot to change the slide here. This is the per team analytics. And that was all of my 7 steps. So I'm thinking I'm just going to do a quick summary here over all of these 7 steps. So first step, I talked about making up your plans and strategies about the implementation, finding the correct stakeholders to get your necessary information, how important that is for the overall implementation, and to create as much value as possible for users. Make sure to get the answers to the correct questions relevant to your organization. Conduct workshops and get to know the why, the short-term as well as the long-term goals, the pains, the quick wins, and create your adoption strategy based on this information. Next is making sure your plans on how to use Teams as well as your current configuration, that this actually works out for your organization before the full implementation. Conducting a pilot to test everything out is important for many reasons. And it's much harder to change and adjust once everything is rolled out to everywhere, to everyone. And users will have a worse experience, hence making adoption also harder to accomplish. Also, training, of course, is affected based on your ways of working, which often are changed and adjusted during a pilot as well. So I'd say the key to a successful pilot is finding the users best fitted to participate in the pilot program, find the best scenarios to try out. And if business, once again, I point out that if business critical processes are part of the implementation strategy, make sure to pilot these. Then, of course, try out the quick wins and find all those things that doesn't work or can improve. Collecting feedback and make adjustments on during the way is huge parts of a pilot as well. So just make it work. So step 3 was communication. And communicating with users from the very start throughout the implementation is so important in so many ways. It makes users feel more involved. It creates the interest and curiosity needed to make users excited for Microsoft Teams. It also prevents confusion and resistance based upon users feeling forced into using the product. Let users know about Microsoft Teams, why you're implementing it, when and how. Tell them the benefits, including how they themselves can benefit from it in their day-to-day work. Number 4 was continuous learning. And as with communication, learning is something your users should do in several steps all through the implementation. These two might intertwine, of course, but while communication focuses more on informing about the product and about the implementation itself, training teaches them how and when to use Teams. Plan for how you will train users, when and through which channels training should be conducted. Do you need your own custom-made training material maybe, or use existing tools and content? Use commonly used channels to reach users with content as well as classroom trainings, learning management systems, and so on and so on. Use your champions as super users and make learning something that happens on a daily basis. Without proper training, there's a big chance users don't do things the way you intended. They might be confused and give up, resulting in switching back to old behavior and ways of working. And you don't want that. Training is not only about the tools and features, but it's also about helping them change their mindset. People are creatures of habit and are used to do their work and tasks in certain ways, right? And using cloud services is different in many ways as well to what people are used to, and might be hard to grasp and understand. Users can be insecure, storing their data in the cloud, not sure where it actually are stored and how to reach it. Making sure your users gets a better understanding of this is equally important. And yet again here, Microsoft Teams is an ever-evolving service, so make sure users are getting continuous information and training even after the implementation itself. So number 5 was creating a champions program, and champions are used to create hype, help out with communication and training, push your users into change of behavior, and to collect feedback. By having the right people throughout the organization, gotten the proper training, will make user adoption much easier and more effective. Set up a champions team and make sure they communicate and help each other out as well as forward feedback from end users, so proper actions can be taken. They are your ears and eyes, not in an espionage way, but rather making sure that users are heard and can make a difference. So they're kind of also an extension of your own arm. So second last step here was individual workshops. Training for the masses are usually very general. Of course, training can be custom fitted to your own organization, but most times the various departments and business units also have their own way of working. I've seen numerous times users had training but still struggle to fit this into their own team's processes and ways of working. So by scheduling short workshops with them, with the team responsibles, and help them set up their team in Microsoft Teams, often makes a huge difference in them actually starting to use Microsoft Teams fully. Ask them about their way of working, their processes and pains. Help them out doing things in Teams and solve their issues if possible. And as I said before, Teams isn't always the solution. Also, I see users trying to do kind of the same old things, but in Teams instead. And this is actually an opportunity to review their ways of working and make it more effective and productive instead. So in the end, my experience with these workshops are that they are very appreciated and beneficial to the different kinds of teams or business units or departments, many names. Just a final kick into start using Microsoft Teams for real. So final step here, measuring usage. I covered this not long ago, so I'll just keep it short here. Measuring your organization's usage, make sure you are aware of sudden drops. In this case, you need to figure out why and do something about it. It could also be encouraging seeing usage increasing over time, of course. Depending on results, it also affects how continuous communication and training should be handled as well. So go through the different reports that applies to your rollout more often during and shortly after. Then maybe not as often, but still on a regular basis after the rollout itself. All right, that was all for me. Thank you so much for attending my session. As I said, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Also, yet again, I want to thank you, the sponsors here and the organizers of this event. Yeah, thank you so much.